The wagon stopped at the gate, and the farmer stepped down, the weight of his decision etched on his. Mary knew what was coming. 4 months overdue on the rent, 3 children to raise alone, and no chance of mercy from a man ever yielded to pleas. She took a deep breath, smoothed her worn apron, and held her eldest son's hand tightly. When her brown eyes met his, something in that moment made the ground tremble beneath both their feet. Before we dive into this story, leave your comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us which town you're joining us from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. The morning sun was still faint when the wagon crossed the dirt track, kicking up that fine dust that clung to clothes and hair. Mr. Thorne held the reins with the firmness of one who never hesitated in the face of a difficult decision. At 42, he carried on his shoulders the burden of managing alone the lands he had inherited, and in his eyes the mark of 5 years of solitude since his wife had died of fever. No one in the region dared to cross him. They called him Mr. Thorne, but among the workers, the nickname that circulated was different: the Master of Thorne Hall, for the haughty and distant way he conducted his life. On that June morning, the cold cut through the skin like a sharp blade. Mr. Thorne wore his heavy dark wool coat, his gray hair rigorously combed back, and kept a serious face as the wagon advanced along the familiar path. Beside him, the foreman, Joshua, rode in silence, fidgeting with nervous fingers. He knew his boss didn't like small talk, much way to carry out something unpleasant. Mary's cottage was at the edge of the estate, surrounded by a yard that had seen better days. Scrawny chickens pecked through the dry grass, and the wooden fence sagged to one side, held only by the stubbornness of some rusted nails. Inside, the smell of burning wood mingled with the faint aroma of stale bread. Mary had woken before sunrise, as she always did, and had already boiled water for the weak coffee she served her. She was a woman of 30, plain in appearance, with brown hair tied in a loose bun with a worn scarf. Her face, marked by sleepless nights, did not hide the discreet beauty that was still there, especially in her large brown eyes, which shone with a resilient, almost defiant light. A widow for 2 years since her husband had died in a plowing accident, Mary faced alone the challenge of raising 3 children and maintaining a small plot of land that barely provided for their sustenance. When the sound of hooves echoed at the gate, she felt her heart clench. She didn't need to look out the window to know who it was. She wiped her hands on her faded apron and called her children with a firm voice, though her hands trembled. "Peter, Julia, Pete, come inside. Now!" Peter, the eldest, was 11 and had a gaze too serious for his age. He dropped the piece of wood he was playing with in the yard and slowly entered, followed by Julia, who clutched a rag doll made by her mother to her chest. The youngest, Pete, just 4 years old, was still sleeping, curled in an old blanket, oblivious to the weight that was approaching. Mr. Thorne stepped down from the wagon with firm steps, his eyes surveying the poor yard. Joshua stayed behind, holding the reins. The farmer knocked on the door with 3 sharp raps. Mary opened it, her head held high, her eyes fixed on his without flinching. "Mrs. Mary," he said, his voice controlled, almost cold. "I believe you already know the reason for my visit." She nodded slowly. "I know, sir. I know well." The silence that fell between them seemed to last a century. The cold wind swept through the yard and made the door creak. Mary remained firm, but inside she felt. Mr. Thorne looked around, noticing the details he tried to ignore. The swept floor despite the poverty, the clothes carefully folded on a chair, the smell of fresh bread trying to disguise scarcity. "The rent on the land is 4 months overdue," he continued, softer, but without losing his firmness. "The contract is clear. You signed it knowing the conditions." Mary took a deep breath, her chin held high with dignity. "I don't ask for pity, sir. Just a little more time. I've been sowing for the families in the village, and when the harvest from the small cornfield I planted comes in, I'll be able to pay what I owe." He interrupted with a brusque wave of his hand. "The harvest doesn't pay for the past, Mrs. Mary, and I am no bank to wait for promises." It was at that moment that Julia, the 6-year-old girl, slowly approached and held out her rag doll to him, as if it were an offering capable of stopping the storm. Mr. Thorne stared at the child, confused, and for the first time in many years felt something break inside his chest, a thin but deep crack in the wall he had built around his. He looked away, discomfited, and took a step back. "Do I have until the end of the week to vacate the house, Garicore, sir?" Mary asked, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. Thorne hesitated. The answer should have been automatic, but something in that scene, the woman standing before her children, the dignity she carried even in her poverty, the girl's eyes still holding out the doll, made him falter curtly, and turned to leave. Before crossing the gate, he stopped and looked back. Mary remained there, motionless, her face illuminated by the faint morning light. He climbed into the wagon without another word, but the memory of that scene accompanied him all the way back. Days that followed were heavy as lead. Mary rose before dawn, sewed until her fingers ached. At night, when her children slept, she allowed herself to cry softly, away from their eyes. She knew she had nowhere to go. Her husband's family had rejected her after his death, blaming her for not keeping him away from the plow on that fate. Her own relatives lived far away, in another state, and barely had enough for themselves. She tried to sell the few remaining chickens, but the price offered was laughable. She tried to borrow from the shop owner, but he refused with a forced smile, saying that too many people already owed him. The only thing Mary had of value was her dignity, and that she was not willing to negotiate. Meanwhile, at Thorne Hall, Mr. Thorne tried to follow his routine as if nothing had changed. He woke early, inspected the workers, reviewed the account books, and dined alone at the long table that had once been the setting for family gatherings. But the image of Mary and her children returned unbidden, invading his thoughts at the most unexpected moments. On Wednesday, he sent Joshua to her cottage to check if she was preparing to move. The foreman returned with news that disturbed him. "She's packing her bundles, boss," but Joshua hesitated. "She has nowhere to go. I heard her talking to her eldest son. They're going to try to stay with an acquaintance in the village, but the woman can only offer shelter for a few days." Mr. Thorne frowned but said nothing. He returned to the papers on his desk, but the words danced before his eyes without making sense. That night, as the fine rain beat against the window panes, he found himself thinking of the wife he had lost. He remembered how she used to plead with him to be kinder to the tenants, more understanding of others' difficulties. He always replied that charity didn't pay bills, that sentiment didn't run a farm. She would smile sadly and not insist, but her gaze said it all. After she died, Mr. Thorne hardened even more. It was as if grief had turned to stone within him, and this stone protected him from anything that could hurt him again. But now, for the first time in 5 years, he felt the stone crack. Thursday, without telling anyone, he saddled his horse and rode to Mary's cottage. He arrived in the middle of the afternoon, when the faint sun was trying to break through the clouds. He found her in the yard, hanging clothes on the makeshift clothes. She stopped when she saw him, her hands holding a wet sheet. "Mr. Thorne," she greeted neutral. "Mrs. Mary," he replied, his horse. I came to check if everything is all right." She stared at him with those brown eyes that seemed to read beyond words. "As well as can be expected, sir. Tomorrow we will be gone." He looked around, noticing the bundles piled on the porch, the few old pieces of furniture ready to be loaded. He also noticed the effort she made to keep the house clean until the last moment, as if her dignity would not allow her to leave a mess behind. "And where will you go?" Mary hesitated, but answered, "An acquaintance in the village can shelter us for a few days. After that, I'll find something. I always do." Mr. Thorne nodded slowly. "And the children? Will they be able to continue in school?" She looked away, and he realized he had touched an open wound. "Not for once I get settled. They'll go." He stood there, feeling the weight of that conversation. For the first time, he saw Mary not as a defaulter, but as a woman fighting against the world with her own hands. And her children were not just names on a contract, they were flesh and blood children, with dreams and fears. Not knowing what to say, Mr. Thorne turned and mounted his horse. Before leaving, he looked at her once more. "You need anything?" He began, knowing how to finish the sentence. Nodded, and he rode off at a gallop, the fine rain beginning to fall again. Friday dawned cloudy and cold. Mary woke with the weight of farewell in her chest. She packed the last bundles, prepared weak coffee for her children, and tried to keep her voice firm as she explained to them that they would have to leave the house. "But will we come back, Mamma?" Julia asked, clutching her rag doll. "We'll see, my dear, we'll see," Mary replied, unable to promise what she didn't know if she could fulfill. Peter, the eldest, said nothing. He simply helped carry the bundles to the gate, his face set, his shoulders too tense for an 11-year-old boy. Pete, the youngest, cried softly, not quite understanding what was happening. When the hired cart driver arrived to collect the few things they owned, Mary took one last look at the house. Small, simple, full of leaks and cracks, but it had been her home for 4 years. There she had raised her children, faced widowhood, dreamed of better days. Now, she was leaving without knowing if she would ever return. The cart driver helped stack the bundles onto the old wagon, and Mary climbed in with her children. But before the man could give the command for the horses to depart, the sound of hooves rapidly approached. It was Mr. Thorne, riding at an almost desperate pace. He stopped before the wagon, breathless, his eyes fixed on Mary. "Wait," he said. Mary frowned, confused. The cart driver stopped. Awaiting orders, Mr. Thorne dismounted his horse and walked to her, the words coming with difficulty, as if each one cost him a piece of the pride he had held on to for so long. I need to speak with you, alone." Mary stepped down from the wagon, her heart racing, not understanding what was happening. They walked a few steps away, and Mr. Thorne took a deep breath before speaking. "I spent the night thinking," he began, avoiding her gaze. "And I can't do this. I can't turn you and the children out like this." Mary widened, but she said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "I discovered something yesterday afternoon," Mr. Thorne continued, his voice firmer now. "Joshua, my foreman, was lying about your debts. He falsified the records to make it seem like you owed more than you actually did. Fired him yesterday." Mary felt her legs weaken. Joshua had always been rude to her. I never imagined he would bitterly. He wanted me to remove you. Silence fell between them, heavy and dense. Mary tried to process. Mr. Thorne continued before he... "I'm going to cancel the eviction. You can stay, and..." He hesitated, looking around as if afraid of being overheard. "And I'm going to forgive the debt. You don't owe me anything anymore." Mary felt tears welling up, but she swallowed her cries. "Mr. Thorne, I don't want charity. I can pay, I just need time." He shook. "It's not charity. It's justice." And his voice faltered, and he had to take a deep breath to continue. "I'm tired of being the man everyone fears, but no one truly respects. I want to do the right thing, at least once." Mary looked at him, seeing for the first time the man behind the mask of coldness, and in that moment something changed between them, a silent connection made of mutual respect and recognition. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice low but firm. Mr. Thorne simply nodded and turned to return to his horse. But before mounting, he looked at the cart driver. "You can unload everything. Mrs. Mary is not leaving." The cart driver obeyed, and Mary went back inside the house with her children, still stunned by what had just happened. Peter hugged her tightly, and Julia let out a cry of joy. Pete, not fully understanding, just smiled when he saw his siblings happy. And outside, Mr. Thorne rode back to Thorne Hall, his chest still tight, but with a strange sensation, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from him. In the days that followed, the news spread through the village like wildfire. Mr. Thorne had forgiven the debt of Mary, the poor widow. Sharp tongues began to wag, speculating about his motives. Some said he was getting old and sentimental. Others insinuated worse things, whispering that he had an interest in the woman. Mr. Thorne heard the rumors in silence, his jaw tight, but didn't bother to respond. He knew that the more he defended himself, the more he would fuel the gossip. But inside, it bothered him more than he cared to admit. Mary, for her part, remained steadfast. She continued sewing to earn a living, and now, without the burden of debt, she could organize her life better. But she also felt the weight of the stares in the village. The women greeted her with false smiles, and the men stared at her with inconvenient curiosity. It was on a Saturday afternoon at the market itself that the situation exploded. Mary was arranging fruits at her stall when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Look who's here." The orchard widow. It was Eleanor, the former foreman Joshua's wife, a tall woman with harsh features, known for her sharp tongue. She was accompanied by two friends, all looking at Mary with barely disguised contempt. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Eleanor," Mary greeted her politely, trying to ignore the provocative tone. "Good about this afternoon," Eleanor retorted. "I came here to tell you the truth to your face. Everyone knows you're taking advantage of Mr. Thorne. My husband lost his job because of you, and now you're there, all high and mighty, pretending you own the place." Mary felt her blood rise. "But your husband lost his job because he lied and falsified documents. Mrs. Eleanor, it wasn't because of me." "Lies!" Eleanor shouted, drawing everyone's attention. "You poisoned the farmer's mind. A lone woman, playing coy, all to get what you want. Everyone knows how it is." People began to gather, curious. Mary felt her hands tremble, but she wasn't going to let that woman humiliate her in front of everyone. "I work honestly," she said, voice firm now. "I get up before sunrise. I sweat in the orchard. I take care of my duties. If that bothers you, it's your problem, not mine." Eleanor advanced, her finger raised, but before she could say anything else, a grave voice cut through the air. "That's enough?" It was Mr. Thorne. He had just arrived at the market and seen the commotion from afar. He walked to the stall with firm steps, his face set, his hard gaze fixed on Eleanor. "Mr. Thorne, I was just—" she began, but he interrupted her. "I know exactly what you were doing, and I'm going to make it very clear, right here, in front of everyone. Mrs. Mary works for me because she is competent, honest, and dedicated. Anyone who has a problem with that can come speak to me directly. And as for your husband, Mrs. Eleanor, he was dismissed for dishonesty. If you wish to discuss it, we'll settle it in court." Silence fell like a stone. Eleanor turned red with anger and embarrassment. She didn't have the courage to continue. Turned and left, followed by her friends, leaving a trail of murmurs behind. Mr. Thorne looked around, facing the people who were still watching. "The market continues. Anyone who wants to buy good fruit, it's right here." And, surprisingly, people began to approach. Mr. Thorne's public defense had silenced many mouths, and some even felt ashamed for having fueled the gossip. Mary looked at him, her eyes moist, but without letting the tears fall. "Thank you, sir." He simply nodded, but there was something different in his gaze, something Mary couldn't decipher, but that made her feel a strange warmth in her chest. After the episode at the market, something changed between Mary and Mr. Thorne. They didn't talk about the matter, but there was a new closeness, a trust that went beyond work. He began to visit her more frequently, sometimes for no apparent reason, just to talk. One afternoon, Mr. Thorne appeared at her cottage carrying a bag of seeds. "Sunflower seeds," he explained, placing the bag on the porch. "I thought you could plant them around the yard. It looks nice and also attracts bees, which helps pollinate the orchard." Mary took the bag, surprised by the gesture. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. I don't even know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," he replied, but his manner was different. Less formal, almost shy, they stood there on the porch, talking about simple things, the weather, the crops, plans for the next harvest, but beneath the words there was a silent current, something neither dared to name. Peter watched from a distance, his gaze suspicious. He didn't like seeing the farmer so close to his mother. He remembered well the day he almost turned them out of their home, and, even after everything, he still harbored a hidden resentment. One night, after Mr. Thorne had left, Peter confronted his mother. "Mama, why does Mr. Thorne come here so much?" Mary stopped tidying the kitchen and looked at her son. "Because we work together. My son. He comes to talk about the orchard. But he stays here a long time, and the way he looks at you—" Mary felt her face flush. "Peter, you're imagining things. Mr. Thorne is my boss, that's all." Peter didn't seem convinced, and the truth was, Mary wasn't either. Because she herself had started to notice the way Mr. Thorne looked at her, and worse, she had started to realize that she liked that. Night, alone in her room, she found herself thinking about him, about the discreet smile he would give when she told some funny story, about the deep, calm voice that soothed her when she was worried, about the way he treated her children, with a patience that contrasted with his reputation as a stern man. She tried to push these thoughts away. Mr. Thorne was a rich, respected farmer from a traditional family. She was a poor widow, a mother of 3, with nothing but her labor. It made no sense. And yet her heart did not obey logic. Meanwhile, at Thorne Hall, Mr. Thorne faced a similar battle. For 5 years he had not allowed himself to feel anything for anyone. After his wife died, he locked his heart and threw away the key. But Mary had found a crack, and now he couldn't stop thinking about her. He thought about the way she faced difficulties with her head held high, about the sparkle in her eyes when she talked about her children, about the rare but genuine laugh that escaped when he told some clumsy joke. He thought about her calloused hands, always busy, always creating, always fighting. He tried to convince himself that it was admiration, respect. But deep down, he knew it was more than that, bringing cold winds and the second harvest of the year. The orchard continued to produce, and Mary was now known in the region for the quality of the fruit she sold. Mr. Thorne, discreetly, helped with contacts, introducing her to larger merchants, opening doors she could never have opened alone. It was during one of these trips to the larger town that everything changed. Mr. Thorne had business to resolve in town and invited Mary to come along, taking the opportunity to introduce her to an important buyer. She accepted, leaving the children with a trusted neighbor. The buggy ride lasted all day. They talked about everything, about the past, about the dreams each had kept hidden, about the losses that had marked their lives. For the first time, Mary saw Mr. Thorne speak openly about his wife, about the grief he still carried, about the loneliness that consumed him. I think I stopped living when she died," he confessed, looking at the road ahead. "I just existed, fulfilling duties, managing lands, but not truly living." Mary listened in silence, her heart heavy. "And now?" she asked softly. Mr. Thorne looked at her. The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Mary looked away, her heart not knowing what to say. They arrived in town late in the afternoon. The meeting with the buyer was successful, and they closed a good contract for the next harvests. On the way back, a storm caught them by surprise. The rain fell heavily, drenching everything. Mr. Thorne tried to speed up the horses, but the road became dangerous. They had to take shelter in a small road, waiting for the storm to pass. Inside the empty shop, lit only by a faint lamp, they remained silent for a while. Mary shivered with cold, her wet hair clinging to her face. Mr. Thorne took off his coat and placed it over her. She nodded, but didn't move away, listening to the rain. And it was in that moment, without thinking, Mr. Thorne spoke what he had held back for so long. "Mary, I need to tell you something." She looked at him. "I know I don't have the right. I know people will talk. I know it's complicated. I can't pretend anymore that I don't feel anything for you." Mary's eyes widened, unable to breathe. "I'm not asking for anything," he continued. "I just wanted you to know that you changed my life. You made me remember what it's like to feel something again." He felt tears welling up, but they were tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of recognition, of something she too had been holding back, unsure how to deal with it. "Augustus, I feel it too," she confessed, her voice trembling. "But I'm afraid. Afraid of everything. Afraid of what people will say. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid of—" Held her face gently, interrupting the flow of words. "You are more than enough. You are the most real thing that has happened in my life." Years. And there, in the faint, with the storm roaring outside, kissed for the first time. It was a shy kiss, almost hesitant, but full of truth. A kiss that sealed something going for months, silent and inevitable. The journey home was silent, but it was not a heavy silence. It was the quietness of someone who had just walked through a door and was trying to understand what lay on the other side. Mary rested her head on Mr. Thorne's shoulder as the buggy swayed on the bumpy road, and he held her hand, intertwining their fingers gently, as if afraid of breaking something precious. But reality awaited on the other side of that journey. When they arrived back in the village, sharp tongues were already ready. It didn't take long for someone to notice the way they looked at each other, the way he helped her down from the buggy, the new closeness between them. The gossip exploded. They said Mary had gotten what she wanted all along. She had seduced the widowed farmer, taking advantage of his vulnerability, that it was only a matter of time until he tired of her and sent her away, as rich men do with poor women. Peter heard the comments at school and came home with a set face. He confronted his mother that very night. "Is it true, Mama? You and Mr. Thorne, you together?" Knowing she couldn't lie to her son. "Peter, I know it's hard to understand, but yes, I care for him, and he cares for me." "How could you?" The boy exploded, his eyes welling up. "After everything he did, he almost threw us into the street, Mama, and now you're with him." "He regretted it, my son. He recognized his mistake, and that erases everything. Erases the fear I felt, erases the nights you cried to live." Mary felt tears stream. She knew her son was right. She knew it wasn't simple. It wasn't easy, that there were wounds that hadn't fully healed. "I'm not asking you to forget, Peter. I'm just asking you to try to understand that people can change. That sometimes we find something good where we least expect it." Peter turned his back, but before leaving the room, he said something that broke Mary's heart. "And if he changes again, Mama, what if he gets tired of you and goes back to being the cold man he was before? What will we do?" He left, slamming the door, and Mary broke down in sobs, because she too was afraid of that. She too wondered if she was being naive, if she was making a huge mistake. At Thorne Hall, Mr. Thorne faced his own demons. Sitting before the unlit fireplace, he looked at the portrait of his wife that still occupied a place of honor in the living room. For the first time in 5 years, he felt no guilt in thinking about moving forward. But he felt fear of disappointing Mary, fear of not being the man she deserved, fear that the world around them would destroy something so fragile and precious. It was on a Sunday morning that he made a decision. He rose early, put on his Sunday best, something he'd worn in years, and went to Mary's cottage, opened the door and waited, his hat in his hands. He opened it, surprised to see him there on that day and hour. He wasted no time. "Mary, I want to do things properly. I want everyone to know that I am serious about you. I want to introduce you as the woman I intend to have by my side. If you accept, of course." She looked at Peter, who watched from a distance, his arms crossed. So she looked at Julia and Pete, who didn't quite understand what was happening. And she looked at Mr. Thorne, seeing in his eyes the same vulnerability she felt. "Augustus, people will talk. Let them talk. I don't care anymore. And your friends, your family, what will they say when they find out you're with a widow? With 3 children, they'll have to accept it, or they'll lose my friendship. The choice is theirs." Mary felt her heart clench. This was it. This was what she needed to hear, not empty promises, not pretty words, but the certainty that he was willing to face the world by her side, her voice firm now. Sunday, they went to church together. They entered, hand in hand, under the scandalized and curious gazes of the entire village. They sat on the pew, side by side, their heads held high. People whispered, pointed, judged, but they didn't care because they were together, and that in that moment was all that mattered. The months that followed were not easy. Peter's resistance remained strong. The boy treated Mr. Thorne with polite coldness, greeted him when necessary, but never failed to show his distrust. Mr. Thorne respected the boy's space, without forcing closeness, but always present, always constant. It was one afternoon, when Peter was trying to fix the yard fence alone and couldn't, that Mr. Thorne approached. "May I help?" Peter hesitated, but they worked side by side. Mr. Thorne spoke. "I know you don't like me. Done to him what I did to you and your family. I wouldn't like that person either." Peter stopped working and looked at him, surprised by his honesty. "But I want you to know one thing, Mr. Thorne. I will take care of your mother. I will take care of you, Julia and Pete. Not because I want to replace your father. No one will replace him, but because you are important to me. Because I want to be part of this family, if you'll let me." Peter remained silent for a long time. Then, without looking at Mr. Thorne, he said something that made the farmer swallow hard. "Mother is happy. I sit. She smiles more, sleeps better, doesn't cry in the middle of the night any more, and I think it's because of you." Thorne waited, saying nothing. "But if you hurt her again," Peter, looking directly at him, "never forgive you. Never." "I won't hurt her, Mr. Thorne." "Come, you have my word." And slowly, brick by brick, trust began to be built. Peter gradually accepted Mr. Thorne, Julia, and Pete. Naturally more open, had already almost adopted him as a father figure. Pete, especially, clung to the farmer whenever he could, asking to be carried, showing drawings, telling nonsensical stories. The orchard flourished once more, larger and more beautiful than ever. Mary and Mr. Thorne worked side by side, building something that went beyond business, a life. They renovated Mary's cottage, extending the rooms, replacing the roof, painting the walls. Mr. Thorne insisted it was an investment in the property, but everyone knew it was affection translated into bricks and wood. One full moon night, as they walked through the orchard hand in hand, Mr. Thorne stopped beneath the apple tree, the same one where they had first talked about things beyond. "Mary, I want to ask you something." She looked at him, her heart racing. "I know we've been through a lot. I know we started in the most difficult way possible, but I can't imagine my life without you, without the children, without everything we've built." He knelt there, before her, beneath the stars and the full moon, and took a simple, old gold ring from his pocket, the same one that had belonged to his mother. "Marry me, Mary. Let me be your true companion. Let me take care of you and the children for the rest of our lives." Mary felt tears stream down her face. This time they were pure tears of happiness. "Yes," she said, her voice choked. "Yes, I will." He placed the ring on her finger, stood up, and kissed her, while the night wind hummed through the leaves, as if nature itself celebrated that moment. The news of the engagement spread quickly. There were those who were scandalized, but there were also those who were happy. Because over the months, many people had seen the transformation in both of them. They had seen Mr. Thorne smile again, participate in the community, be kind to the workers. They had seen Mary flourish, gaining confidence, showing the world what she was capable of. The wedding was simple, in the village church, with the children as the main witnesses. Peter, dressed in the new suit Mr. Thorne had bought for him, walked beside his mother to the altar. And when the priest asked if anyone objected to that union, it was Peter himself who spoke, loud and clear. "I do not object. I accept." And in that moment, Mr. Thorne knew he had gained more than a wife. He had gained a family. The years that followed were years of prosperity and peace. The orchard became a benchmark in the region. And Mary, a respected rural businesswoman, Mr. Thorne bequeathed his lands to her in his will, ensuring that, whatever happened, she and her children would be protected. Peter grew up and became the estate manager, working side by side with the stepfather he learned to love. Julia studied and became a teacher. Pete followed in Mr. Thorne's footsteps and dedicated himself to agriculture. And when the wind passed through the valley, carrying the scent of flowers and the sound of laughter that filled Thorne Hall with life again, Mr. Thorne and Mary sat on the porch, hand in hand, and thanked for every stone on the path that led them. Some lands are not conquered with gold, but with humanity, and some loves are not born of fairy tales, but of senses, forgiveness, and the courage to begin anew, and you, who followed this journey from beginning to end. Have you learned along with Mr. Thorne and Mary that it's never too late to change, to ask for forgiveness, to choose love over pride? If this story touched your heart, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories that will move you, and tell us in the comments, do you believe in second chances in love? Your participation is what keeps these stories alive. Until next time.